Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. If you want to learn how to support this channel, its mission to normalize atheism and deconversion, stay tuned today to the end of the video. This is part 6 in a series of videos entitled Questionable Witnesses, An Atheist Teaches Life of Christ. Today we'll be looking at Luke 1:39 through 56, Mary visits Elizabeth. I'm teaching the Gospels much like I did many times in my churches as a pastor over the years, but now I'm teaching it as an atheist. The whole issue of this series has been to get to how many witnesses do the Gospel accounts actually have. The Bible's admonition of 2 or 3 witnesses is our first test. The next test is modern scholarship, which is a little bit more rigorous as providing proof or truth to the falsehood of claims with other criteria. Plus, I want to make any remarks about the story that I think are pertinent. I also want to make some deconversion notes. The text is a little long this time, so I'll have you read it, but let me summarize the story. Coming off the heels of being told that she is going to give birth to the Messiah, Mary decides to verify what the angel told her about her relative Elizabeth. So Mary travels to Elizabeth, and then she arrives. The unborn baby John leaps for joy. This leads Elizabeth to being filled with the Spirit and saying a few things about Mary being blessed among women. That Mary was the mother of her Lord, as in a sense indicated that she is honored, that Mary would even visit her. This causes Mary to break into song and to speak where she definitely quotes the Psalms in 2 places, Psalm 103:17 and 107:9. Mostly though she praises God and talks about how future generations will call her blessed. Now on to our criteria. From a biblical point of view, the first problem is, once again, the author of Luke is anonymous, which means we don't even actually have his witness per se. That author doesn't name themselves, and so that becomes a problematic thing for them being a witness, which means you can only engage in speculation and conjecture as to who they are. The writer of Luke indicates that this is the case of the life of Christ. They are not eyewitnesses of the events, but just collecting the stories. It would have been helpful if who the story was gathered from was also mentioned, but the writer doesn't do that either. So where the story comes from is a big question, even from the author's point of view. Not to mention that this is the only gospel that has this story in it. So even among the Gospels, this is the one and only witness that the event is claimed to have even happened. The only thing that actually meets the biblical criteria, and only if the story is true, is that Mary and Elizabeth would constitute two witnesses of what happened between them. But that is it, and from a modern scholarship point of view, this is still a problem. When we go on to modern scholarship, the problem with eyewitnesses in general is collusion happens a lot, especially if the witnesses are given time to talk among themselves. So there's a real possibility of collusion between Mary and Elizabeth that could have been eliminated if there had been other witnesses of the event that were stated who they were and where they were at. But this is not stated at all. That would mean that the idea that other witnesses is speculation and conjecture of this event. There is also the problem of the historicity of the characters. If Luke didn't mention Zacharias and Elizabeth, they wouldn't be a part of this, as there are no records of the fact that they ever existed outside of this story. Now some other notes. This has a very advanced theology of the veneration of Mary that would have been much more popular where the idea of her veneration as Mother of God would have started, and where that idea was much more common. This indicates a much later theological development, and this is one of the many reasons I am putting the writing of Luke at a later date myself, and why many other scholars do as well. You just don't see this veneration of Mary in some other early Christian writings, but you do see it starting up in the 2nd century or so. Secondly, Mark has no birth narrative, and that's important because Luke here seems like he's very much adding something to the story that is, well, apologetical in nature. He's answering later questions about Jesus' origin, how one could look at Jesus if he was the Son of God. How could that be true if Jesus' father was a man? If Jesus' Mary was a virgin, solves that very thorny theological issue. It's also much more reactive to the type of original skepticism that would have been about the life of Jesus and who he was. Thirdly, now the issue of whether or not Mary was the source of these stories comes up again. Many conservatives stating that the detail indicates that her testimony might have been gathered by the writer. I would say this is also speculation and conjecture, as you can be writing fiction and put in details and make the account realistic without it being real. I mean, these people were surrounded by myths of many religions, and these legends also had high detail as well at times. This makes any statement that Mary was the source conjecture and speculation, as well as any other conjecture and speculation that would be about the passage. Now, I have to address this issue of conjecture and speculation, as it has been the comment many times on this series by some believers. You're right, and much of what critics do is conjecture and speculation. But that is true for you as well. And the whole discussion of Mary as a source for Luke's account is speculative and conjecture as well, and is a good example. Let me be blunt here. When we're talking about the Gospels in general, speculation and conjecture are inevitable because of their anonymous nature. This is the big problem with the fact that the authors are unknown, and that makes speculation and conjecture inevitable as to a higher degree as opposed to as if they had named themselves. The same can be said because each individual story in the Gospels is anonymous as to its particular source as well. This is what invites speculation and conjecture on all sides, and that is pretty much inescapable. Now, at some point, Irenaeus, as the source, said that this is written in the book, but he never tells us where he got that idea. The specific of war or who gives him that information is left out. He is also the only one and could have been given false information. He could be mistaken. His own source of where he got that information could have been mistaken. People run to him because of their confirmation bias, that they want his statements about the authorship to be true. But there is no confirmation that they are from this or any other source, that basically he could be making it up, and that's all we would know. Off script, part of my deconversion was a recognition of my own confirmation bias, and my views of the Gospels were actually part of the problem. I began to realize that often I would filter what I felt about the scriptures in general, but in the Gospels in particular, because I wanted Jesus to be a true character and I wanted all of that. Confirmation bias has a lot to do with what we're doing. Modern scholarship attempts to remove that confirmation bias, and that's why it engages these things in such a way. Now, you either have to accept my conjecture and speculation as valid as your own, or dismiss it all to be intellectually honest. In other words, what I'm saying here is you're engaged in speculation too. This is a good example of, once again, the reason that the detail is so high here in Luke is because the author is using Mary as the source. That's conjecture. It's also speculative. Okay, and so my thoughts are it was written later, represents a later development in theology, and also has other things, is also conjecture and speculative, openly admitted. But that's the problem. Once again, it is the anonymous authorship and the anonymous sources. That means that everybody who sits down to the Gospels is engaged in conjecture and speculation about what's really going on here. If the authors had named themselves and named their sources, a lot of that conjecture and speculation would disappear. But because they're anonymous and all that, that is why there's conjecture and speculation, and everybody is doing it. You either have to accept that all conjecture and speculation is valid on this passage, or you also have to dismiss your own along with mine. You're kind of caught in a pickle there of either accepting that everything's going to be speculative about this passage, or you are going to have to discard it all and say, well, none of this can really work because it's just all speculative and conjecture. Sorry, if this whole thing with the Gospels is conjecture and speculation from the jump because of their nature. Now, the whole confirmation bias thing, why do you view this thing the way you do as a Christian or as a believer? It's because you want it to be true. When I talk about deconversion, the moment of deconversion is very difficult because it is very hard to get over the fact that you're wanting to see everything in a positive light. You want things to be true. You want the story to be true. You want these things to be true. That's your bias, okay? I have no real axe to grind with the story. If somebody came along with the sources that gave Luke the authorship and gave the sources where the story came from, and we could verify all that, I would have no problem with that, and I would easily change my view. It is the theist, the Christian, that believes in these passages that has to get over their confirmation bias because they want it to be true. I don't really have that. What I have is an understanding that all of this is conjecture and speculation, and conjecture and speculation is not something I'm going to base my life around. I'm not going to sit there and take my life and lose it over an account where there is no confirmation of, there's no real look at this is the facts of what happened. And that's the issue here. So many Christians, because of their bias, because of their emotional need for it to be true, this is why they hold on to stories like this, even though Luke is the only one that talks about this story. The other gospel writers don't even mention it. You also have the fact that the writer is anonymous. The story sources itself is anonymous. These are all facts. This isn't conjecture and speculation. These things are true. The conjecture and speculation comes when we try to figure out why that's the case. And it's because of that nature that it is a problem. It's very much a case when it comes to deconverting, and I deal with theists on this channel all the time, and this series has kind of ruffled their feathers a little bit because I'm pointing out to them everything you engage in is speculative too, everything you is conjecture as well. You don't have any proof of who the author is, where their sources are. These are facts and evidence. And so why you're saying that this is true story and this is the way it happened is because you want it to be true. It's your confirmation bias of your that's given to you by your faith. I don't really have that anymore. I used to believe this stuff, but now I don't. And the reason is the examination of the evidence that supported it. The witnesses of the Gospels, and that's where I got the title of this series, is questionable witnesses, because everything is questionable. And that's the problem with the Gospels. Everything is questionable. Everything leads us to conjecture. Everything leads us to speculation because of the very nature of the subject matter. Well, I hope that clears some things up. I want to thank everybody for stopping by once again. I appreciate every like, share, and subscribe. So, hit those buttons and do the things that you do. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Join the Rabyd Nation. But if you want to be a citizen of the Rabyd Nation, membership is the best way to do that. And it's also the best way to support the channel because it allows that monthly support to allows me to focus more and more on the videos that you love and enjoy instead of appeasing the YouTube algorithm as much. You also can super chat, super thanks the channel. Thank you very much for all of that. And, my PayPal link is in the description. These are all good ways to support the channel. And I want to thank all of those members that I do have. You guys are awesome. I want to give a shout out to all of them because you guys are what continues to make this channel grow and develop and be what it is. Appreciate all of you. Thank you very much. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over. So you want to take all your time, your money, your opportunities, and spend them on yourself, the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. You'll be happier if you do. Don't waste them on the trappings of religion and faith because that's a dead end. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.